I did a blog a couple of weeks ago about great unmade films, and I talked about Lynne Ramsay's failed attempt to make The Lovely Bones. I said, well, in the end, maybe that failure was worth it, because at the end of it, she made We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is one of my favourite films of this year, if not my favourite. And I keep thinking about the movie, having seen it about a month ago. It plays on my mind an awful lot. I've been trying to figure out what it is that I find so interesting about it. And one of the things is the way it fits into a peculiar subgenre of horror movie, which is the movie or the story about the fear of children, the paedophobic horror story. Now, if you know anything about horror, you'll know this is a very common element, the idea of children as terrifying. You look back through recent literature, John Wyndham's The Midwich Cuckoos, famously filmed as Village of the Damned. Look at Anthony Burgess's Clockwork Orange, arguably a horror novel, famously filmed by Stanley Kubrick, still controversial. I programmed it recently as part of a film season, still a controversial movie. The Exorcist in the 1970s, classic paedophobic tale. The Omen, which was very much an Exorcist rip-off, but again, a huge hit. And then around the same time, there were trashy paperback novels. Does anyone remember Let's Go Play at the Adams, which was available in railway stations for years? At the centre of all these is the idea of children as rebellious and terrifying. And there's a sociological reading of why those stories are popular. Bear with me. Here's how it goes. It says that in the 1960s and 70s particularly, there was a generation gap when the adult generation became really scared of the young generation who were more affluent, more rebellious, more intelligent than they were. And this apparently gave rise to a bunch of phobias which manifested themselves in all these horror stories, Rosemary's Baby, that sort of thing. Stephen King writes in his theoretical work, Danse Macabre, that the reason The Exorcist worked in the 1970s was because, and I'm pretty much quoting here, he said, everyone understood that the demon in Reagan McNeil would have responded enthusiastically to the fish cheer at Woodstock. Many of those films draw on the idea of young people using a language which their parents don't understand, whether it's Nadsat in Anthony Burgess's Clockwork Orange or the strange speaking in tongues that the demonically possessed do. Well, of course, there was a famous book in the 1970s called They Don't Speak Our Language, which was specifically written for parents to help them understand what on earth it was that their kids are talking about. And it is still a parental trait to listen to pop music and go, I can't understand the words, what on earth are they saying? But underlying all of this is a central and possibly more important theme, the fear that your children are smarter than you are. In The Midwich Cuckoos, Village of the Damned, Zellaby, the academic, discovers that the children, the alien children, can outthink him on pretty much any level. In Clockwork Orange, what's so terrifying about Alex is not that he's a hooligan, not that he's a thug, not that he's on the rampage, but that he can listen to Beethoven and be smarter than the prison warders. Clive Barker once famously said that his big problem with The Exorcist was that he thought that Reagan McNeil was much more interesting and certainly much more intelligent when she was possessed by the demon Pazuzu, and he didn't see any reason to cast that demon out. That idea that intelligence and demonic power go hand in hand is a very powerful one. Stanley Cohen wrote about folk devils and moral panics. He described the mods and rockers riots of the 1960s as somehow being a folk devil rising up from the popular consciousness, and talked again about the idea that parents couldn't understand the culture that was producing these riots. I think that's one of the reasons why Quadrophenia, the movie, still works to this day. And that idea is certainly there and present in We Need to Talk About Kevin. The fear that the mother has that her kid knows what he's doing, may be smarter than her, or more specifically, may be smarter than her in her eyes. Because a central theme of all these stories is the idea that we are seeing children through the eyes of terrified parents. Just reading in the paper the other day that the people who are in their first term of college, maybe that's you, have had to struggle harder than any of us to get into college and have had better A-level results than any of us got. How do we all respond to this? Oh, well, A-levels have obviously got easier. If people can get 5 A's now, they must be easier than when we were young. Isn't there a more worrying underlying truth here that goes all the way through those horror stories about fearful children? The terror is not to do with the young people of today are thugs, hooligans, maniacs, rioters, whatever. The real fear is they're smarter than us.
What are all these people watching? People like me.
Doesn't Kevin go to Gladstone High?